If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn Hansen, your host, and I'm happy to be back for the second show of 2024. I hope you're doing well so far this year, and depending on where you live, I hope you're also staying warm. I know it's been really cold in a lot of places. Today, Coach Julie is here to talk with me about the topic of allowing what is. And I want to introduce this a little bit and also relate it to the weather, because I think there's an interesting correlation there. Those of you who have listened to the podcast know that I use the term dismissing urges to binge, and Coach Julie uses the term allowing urges to binge. When I say dismiss the urge, I mean to let it just be unimportant to you, to let it be something that's not worthy of your attention, just like you might dismiss your alarm clock if it's going off when you didn't set it, just like you might dismiss someone else's opinion when you don't agree with it or it's just not in line with who you are. When you dismiss something, you're setting it apart from your identity, you're setting it apart from who you truly are. Now, if we think about the term allowing and you say you're going to allow the urges to binge, that opens up a little different way to think about this, because some people will say, oh, my urges are there for so long and I can say they're not important. I can say they're neurological junk, but they're still there. And yes, that's absolutely okay. And I think that's where the allowing really comes in. You need to allow those sensations, allow the thoughts, the feelings, all those reasons your brain gives you to binge. You can be with that experience without letting it drive you into action. And when we have that allowing mindset, it really opens us up to being able to be uncomfortable, because the urges do often make us uncomfortable, without feeling like we have to solve that discomfort by acting, by eating these extreme amounts that make us feel awful. So it's not really an either or when we think about dismissing urges to binge or allowing urges to binge. They really kind of go together, and you can determine how it's most helpful for you to think about this. In this episode, we're talking about allowing what is in relation to the urges, but also in relation to all of life, because there are other things that we need to learn to allow in recovery, like allowing discomfort surrounding our weight, or surrounding maybe some obsessive thoughts about food, or surrounding issues with our appetite, or imperfections with our eating. And one thing I want you to know up front is that when we talk about allowing these things, it doesn't mean you just take a passive role and just let whatever happens happen and just give up on any goals that you have or give up on the desire to help yourself be healthy. When we accept and allow different aspects of how we feel or different aspects of how our body shows up, we can still take steps to make change. In fact, fighting against what is makes it even harder to change. And this is where I want to bring it back to the weather. And I've used this analogy before on the podcast, but when the weather is cold or rainy or just not to our liking, we don't fight against it. We just have to accept that this is how it is right now. And we do our best to prepare for it. We dress for it, we stay inside, and ultimately maybe we decide to take a vacation or move somewhere else one day. But fighting against the weather is never going to make anything different. And we all naturally know this, and we naturally accept it, and we understand that weather patterns come and go. And even though it feels this way right now, it won't feel exactly the same tomorrow or next week or next month. We can use this same mindset when it comes to urges to binge and when it comes to experiencing the discomfort we sometimes experience in recovery. You, of course, won't like some of this discomfort, just like most of us don't like a really cold day, but you know that it's going to pass. And thankfully, with urges to binge, if you allow them or dismiss them and let them pass over and over again without acting on them, they do go away. The pathways that fuel that habit fade, and then you get to live your life. You get to allow whatever else comes up, and that's really exciting. So I hope that you find this conversation with Coach Julie very helpful. Hi, Julie. I'm so glad you're back.
Hi, Kathryn. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about a concept called allowing what is. And there's so many different ways this applies to recovery. So, Julie, let's just get started in introducing the topic.
Okay, fantastic. This is something I see again and again and again. And I think that it's critical to recovery because as we recover, we are learning to be comfortable with what is, even if what is isn't comfortable, instead of turning to food. This idea that we can be okay with what is as it arises.
Yeah, and I can think of so many ways that this applies. I mean, a lot of times people will think, oh, I ate imperfectly, so I might as well binge. And it's really allowing imperfections, which we've talked about on the podcast. It's allowing your weight to be what it is. It's allowing your
That's right.
appetite to be what it is. So there's a lot of different ways. And yeah, could you just kind of dive more into that and just what you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's like we're learning to allow instead of resist, right? I always say expect and allow urges instead of resisting or fighting against them, and doing that without turning to food. So when you have an urge, right? When you're having any emotion, an uncomfortable emotion, when you're ill, you and I both just recovered from pretty heavy illnesses, right? When you're in pain, if you're dealing with chronic pain, when you have sleep issues and you're sleep deprived, financial concerns, our current weight and size, as you mentioned, our actual appetites, not the appetites we're trying to push down through a diet or that we're binging over, right? The weather, what other people say, do, think, loss of any kind, uncertainty, stress from work, stress from life, and even just the act of saying no to what we think we want right now for choosing what we want long term for ourselves.
Yeah, and all the things you talked about are really part of life. And a
Yeah.
part of life that isn't going to go away. The things you mentioned of financial stress, sickness, emotions. And when we have a binge eating habit, these things can get deeply connected to binging. And so when we have these different stresses, or, not all people binge in response to stress, sometimes they can be good emotions as well, but binging gets connected to life. So we
Yeah.
have these things that happen in our life, we have these emotions and we have urges, and we get so habituated to responding by eating, by binging, that we're not actually allowing what is. And, it's not that we need to fix what is, it's not that we need to cure all our emotions and all our problems, but just to be in that state where you're allowing it, I just think it's just really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to be able to cure everything. It's just not possible. And it's definitely not necessary in order to stop binging, as we say all the time, right? You can't have a perfect life before you stop binging. Like that's just never going to happen because there is no perfection anyway. And as you said, all of the things that I mentioned, they're just part of life. So it's that idea of right now it's like this. And that's okay. I may not like it. I may not want it to be that way, but this is how it is right now. And there's that wonderful quote from Byron Katie, when I argue with reality, I lose, but only 100% of the time. And that's the thing. If we get comfortable saying it's like this, and no matter what, I don't binge. I may not like the way my health is. I may not like the fact that I only slept an hour last night. I may not like it that my child is sick. I may not like it that I can't pay my bills this month. I may not like any of those things. I don't have to like it, but I can allow it to be there and not binge.
Yeah, because when you make the choice to binge, then you're allowing a whole different set of emotions and pain, and allowing that in your life. It's just, both of us have been there. It's so destructive. It affects every part of your life. It
Yeah,
really disconnects you with just being authentic and dealing with the things in your life in any sort of healthy way. So I like that just little shift in allowing your life instead of allowing the painful habit.
that's right. Allow the urges, allow the life instead of allowing binging.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Because, what doesn't work is avoiding what is, right? Pretending it isn't there because it keeps you from addressing the cause of whatever is there. And then acting out against what is or fighting against what is, that only intensifies it because, as you resist it, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, just like urges when we resist them get stronger. And then if we react to what is with really negative emotion, that just leads to negative results. And that could also be reacting to it by eating, right? So then we have all of the negative consequences of the binge on the other side. And we've just reinforced the urge and we haven't addressed any of the things that were bothering us.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And it actually brings me back as you're talking. I think about how all of this was framed when I was in therapy. And those of you who follow my approach and have read my books know that I was taught that binging was a result of these difficult emotions and things like that. So it was all about trying to fix the emotions in order to avoid the binges. And it was such a losing battle. And I feel like the way we're talking about it, it's not vastly different from the therapy, but it's just enough of a shift that it makes sense. And I feel like if it was presented to me in that way back then, I don't know. I just feel like it's so much more powerful than saying, okay, I have to get rid of the depression in order to not binge. Instead, okay, I can be with this depression and still not binge, and they can go together.
That's right. And of course, the irony is that if you have depression and you binge, now you have even more depression and you have a stronger binge eating pattern. Versus if you have depression and you choose not to binge, not only are you freeing yourself from this terrible problem of binge eating, but also often, not all the time, but often, a lot of people's depressive symptoms lessen or lighten because they don't have the inflammation of their gut and brain going on anymore. And suddenly, brain fog lifts, mood improves, all of these things. So it's kind of ironic, right? Like you have to fix your depression in order not to binge, but no, it's kind of the opposite. If you don't binge, and I'm not saying that that's the cure for depression. I am saying though that often we see that people's depressive symptoms ease without the binging.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I will say, as a little bit of a stipulation, sometimes in the beginning, it can feel
That's so
worse
true.
just for a little while.
So true. 1,000,000%. And, that's like if we go back to like talking about dopamine, absolutely. That's such a good point that also it gets worse before it gets better many times because suddenly all of the emotions come flooding to the surface. And you're not used to feeling them. And also, as your dopamine levels start to regulate, there can be these giant swings where depressive symptoms or negative feelings can feel very, very, very raw and intense. Great
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
But
you
that
said,
all normalizes.
yeah, for sure. And then there's a whole new life on the other side, and you have the ability then to deal with the depression, any of the depression that's left, in a healthy way. And you're
That's
so
right.
much more resource, as you always say. And when someone is, like I talked about in the beginning, the urges can get connected to different emotions. So let's just keep the depression as the example here. So if someone is so used to habitually responding to those urges during times of depression with binging, then again, they're allowing those feelings that the binging brings, the temporary pleasure in the moment, the shame afterward. That's what is being created in their life. Okay. So they're not fully feeling those depressed feelings because they're binging, and it's not that
Yeah.
binging is the cure, as we always talk about. Binging is not helping the depression, it's making it worse. But they get a little bit out of practice dealing with the feelings and being
Yeah.
with the feelings. So there can be a time that the feelings feel more overwhelming. And that I think the mistake people make in that moment is they think, oh, the binging was actually helping me. I actually did need to binge to help myself with this emotion. But no, you're just out of practice. And if you can just get through that time, like you talked about, then everything gets better on the other side.
Yeah. And I would say like to the contrary, binging's not helping you. Of course, we know that, but also it's actually a good sign. Like when people tell me, when clients say, "Oh, but I'm not binging and now all my emotions feel so raw and intense and difficult and hard." And I'm like, that is a great sign.
Mhm.
You are healing. Like that's a great sign. And again, it's this piece of allowing what is, going in eyes wide open. When I stop binging, at first, urges are going to be very strong. They're going to be very uncomfortable. And my emotions are going to feel really raw and uncomfortable. And so you go into that eyes wide open. Oh, good. This is a chance to heal. This is a chance to change my brain. This is a chance to rewire pathways in my brain. This is a chance to develop emotional intelligence. This is a chance for me to show myself I can feel any emotion and still stay standing. We're meant to feel all emotions. Discomfort, judgment, fear, shame, helplessness, frustration, vulnerability, imperfection, pain, urges, over desire, rage, insecurity, disappointment, failure, fear, sadness, aloneness, grief, loss. We are meant to feel all of those things along with all the other ones, happy, elated, joyful, loving, all of that. But it's like the gift of being human includes the whole range. And, for many of us, me included, 40 years of binging, I wasn't good at feeling my feelings. So, yeah, it felt really weird. and uncomfortable. And I felt very raw, but it was, oh, good. I'm healing. I'm healing. So to anyone out there who's been binge free, first of all, go you. That's amazing. And if everything feels really raw and uncomfortable, go you. You're healing. That's a sign.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think your experience is so powerful. And a lot of this conversation does bring me back to things I wrote in the book and things about therapy. And one thing I was thinking about, and I hope that can kind of explain this correctly, is that when I was in therapy and was told that, okay, you're binging because of emotions, I thought, well, I actually do want to experience my emotions. It wasn't like, oh, I don't want to feel them because they're so scary. I wanted to feel my emotions and I tried. And the problem was I couldn't dismiss the urges. I didn't know why I was having these urges. I didn't understand the survival mechanism in my brain. I didn't understand habit. I just felt so overwhelmed. So they did get connected to negative emotion. So I'd have the negative emotion. I wanted to feel the negative emotion. It's not like I felt like I was running away. The therapist told me I was running away, but I wanted to feel it. But I had such strong urges to binge. I didn't know how to feel the urges and not binge. So I would get frustrated that, no, I really want life. I really want emotions. I really want to allow what is, but I can't resist this urge. And so I think for me, the most important thing was learning to allow what is in terms of allowing the urge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to, that's the whole point, right? Brain over binge. It's so simple. Eat adequately so you can expect and allow urges, period, or dismiss them. But the point is, that's why we do that. It's top of the pile, right? We're eating adequately and we are not responding to urges with food, period. And then from there, everything else starts to happen, which gets back to the whole piece of allowing urges, allowing what is. Urges arise. They just do. We all feel desire for things. Sometimes it's appropriate desire. Sometimes it's not appropriate desire. And so when we have that over desire for food, but we've been eating adequately, then we can expect and allow those urges and let them move through us.
Yeah. So when you have the skill of eating adequately, it allows you to allow the urges. And then when you allow the urges, then you can allow life.
Everything else. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, maybe I could talk now a little bit about different ways to practice allowing things that people can try out.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, really basic stuff, nothing, there's no rocket science here. But one thing is when discomfort arises, as it will, settle into your body and breathe. Start there. So basic. Everybody can do that. It doesn't cost any money. I encourage people to put their hands on their heart center because that slows the heart rate down. It helps you get into a parasympathetic state, but just taking a minute and breathing and settling into the body. So you're having that uncomfortable urge, you feel yourself going into resistance, you stop and you breathe. Basic. And then, an added layer, because of course we always want to wake up the prefrontal cortex. And so breathing is going to slow us down, get out of the amygdala. And you could say out loud, I'm having an urge right now. It's like this right now. I'm okay. Name it. Name what's going on for you. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. Whatever it is, name the emotion. Because when you say it out loud and you allow yourself to have that feeling, suddenly you're not at war with it anymore. Then from there, you might start to notice, because, as you were describing, those urges were so intense. They were so hard for you to fight against, right? Because you were trying to fight the urges, right? Versus just expecting them to be there once you figured out that whole pattern. And so, when we can name it, I'm feeling an urge and that's okay. I can be with this. Suddenly there's spaciousness. And then when there's spaciousness, it doesn't feel so intense.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful way to frame it and just give people some practical tips. I have a question for you, and I want to see your opinion on this. Yes, absolutely. Feeling your feelings makes so much sense. But there are times that maybe people might just want to check out in other ways, not eating, but just watch a show, scroll on.
Yeah.
I think that can have a place too.
Oh my God, 1,000,000%. And I think super smart to notice, I just need to check out right now. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to think about it. Check out. Yes. As long as we're checking out with something that has no net negative.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe you're turning on some TV show that is really absorbing to you and gives you a little escape. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you're giving yourself that break. That's all we need. I mean, a lot of times I just go to bed. When I'm experiencing a lot of discomfort, it's okay, my brain just needs a break. I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
That's my checking out, going to sleep. Everything looks better in the morning.
It does. It does. And I think people can think, oh, I need to be perfect at feeling my feelings. And it can become a whole different level of perfectionism when you're not going to be perfect at that either. If you turn to some, other guilty pleasure that has no net negative, like you talked about, that's okay sometimes too. Life is a balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Life is a balance. And I mean, that's also part of the problem. We've talked about that before when we were talking about like taking a real break, how often people will say, I just needed a break. And like binging is the opposite of a break.
Mm-hmm.
Take a real break with full permission and full pleasure, always. So much better. Yeah. And the other piece that I was going to say is the obvious things, meditation, journaling. Those are great ways to practice allowing and also letting it be messy. Like, it's okay. There's no perfection about allowing.
For sure. People might think, oh, I didn't allow the feeling. I turned to this TV show, so I'm already failed. No, you aren't. You're just dealing with life the best way you can. The point is to eat adequately, to expect and allow urges to binge. And however you learn to deal with life, you'll figure out your own formula for that too.
That's right. And, I would be remiss if I didn't add that you need to love yourself through this and celebrate every win. Right? So like every time you notice, wow, I had an uncomfortable emotion and I allowed it. Celebrate, 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 right? Like every step of the way, reinforcing that pathway for yourself, reinforcing what you want to be doing. Even if, I had a lot of discomfort and I was like, you know what, tonight I'm just checking out with some TV for a few hours. Good. Go you. Celebrate that.
Yeah, Julie, that was such a great point to wrap this up on. All of this has been so helpful. And I just really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So good to be here. And come get support. If you need support, we're here to provide it.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation on allowing what is. If you do need that additional support, you can get coaching from Julie daily in the Brain Over Binge group. There's a written forum for daily encouragement and accountability and guidance. And Coach Julie also has weekly group coaching calls on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And as I mentioned last week, the group now includes monthly Q&A calls with me, which I'm so excited about doing this year. And these Q&A calls are on the third Thursday of every month. You can learn more at brainoverbinge.com/group. If you're someone who would rather a private one-on-one session with either me or Coach Julie, we offer 45-minute one-on-one coaching sessions, and you can learn more and schedule your call at brainoverbinge.com/1-on-1-coaching. And the links for coaching and all of the other Brain Over Binge resources are in the show description. I appreciate you listening to this episode today. If you found it helpful, we would really appreciate it if you left a review on the podcast platform of your choice. Until next time, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.